Chapter 1. Baton Rouge, Louisiana, January 1933. The church had long since crumbled into ruin, its steeple half collapsed, weathered pews gone gray with rot. Ivy crawled up the stone walls, like it was trying to drag the place back into the earth. A rusted lantern swung from a broken beam, creaking in the wind. Adelaide stood on the rooftop just beyond the fractured bell tower, her arms loose at her sides. Her dark brown hair, wild with curls, whipped across her cheeks in the rising wind. A few strands caught in the corner of her mouth, but she didn't brush them away. Her eyes, wide and dark, stayed fixed on the clouds, unreadable. The wind carried the scent of rain, but the phantom scent of blood clung to her like a second skin. The memory of her brother was all she had left of him. His scream still echoed in her head, the sound of pure terror. He had called out for her. Then there was only silence. She wrapped her arms around herself as the wind grabbed at her wool coat. She didn't wear it for warmth, but to remember what it felt like to be human. It was January 1st, a new year, but nothing inside her felt new. Back then, she hadn't known why they came for her family, or why death had spared her only to twist her into something else. She still didn't, not really. Since then, she'd only heard the hushed whispers about an ancient vampire that was hunting someone he perceived as a threat. But why turn her? Why murder her family? She blinked up at the sky. Gray clouds hung low over the ruins, heavy with rain that hadn't yet fallen. Her thoughts, like the storm, circled back again and again to Elliot. What was the point? Why did he have to die? The first time death came for her family, it struck without warning. Her parents had gone to her uncle's farm near Alexandria to help with the harvest, like they did every summer, loading up the old Ford coupe with bread, peaches, and jugs of sweet tea. Adelaide and Elliot stayed behind that year. Her friend Caroline had come over to help her sew a dress for Sunday service. The two of them were bent over the fabric, laughing softly as Elliot sat off by himself, nose buried in the call of the wild, feigning deep concentration to avoid the girl talk. The Beaumonts had fared better than most. Her father still found odd carpentry jobs when the mills slowed, and her mother took in mending from neighbors who could still pay. But most days the town felt half asleep, storefronts empty, rail cars sitting idle on the tracks, dust thick on everything that didn't move. A sharp knock came at the front door, quick and uneven. Adelaide set down her sewing and wiped her hands on her skirt before answering. A boy stood on the porch, no older than 10, freckles bright against sunburned cheeks. His bicycle leaned crooked against the steps, one wheel still spinning. "Afternoon, Miss Beaumont," he said, shifting from foot to foot. "Pa sent me down, said the sheriff from Alexandria done called over to the general store. Mr. Talbot took the message." Adelaide frowned, brushing a strand of dark hair from her face. "The sheriff? Did he say what for?" The boy shook his head, eyes darting toward the road like he wished he hadn't come. "No, ma'am. Just said you needed to get to the sheriff's office right quick. Something about your folks." The air seemed to thicken around her. "My parents?" He nodded, scuffing his shoe against the porch. "Yes, ma'am." Pa said it sounded mighty serious. Adelaide managed a quiet, "Thank you," though her voice came out thin. The boy tipped his cap and hurried down the steps, pedaling off so fast the gravel spit beneath his tires. For a long moment she stood there, watching until he disappeared around the bend. The sound of cicadas swelled in the silence he left behind. When she turned, Caroline was standing in the doorway, worry etched across her face. "Laney, what was that about?" she asked softly. Adelaide unfolded the note with unsteady fingers. "The sheriff from Alexandria called down to the general store. There's been some kind of trouble. I need to go into town and speak with our sheriff." Caroline's brows drew together. "Then I'll stay here with Elliot till you get back." "He shouldn't be alone." Adelaide nodded, her throat tight. "Thank you, I won't be long." Caroline reached out, briefly touching Adelaide's arm. "Be careful, all right?" Adelaide gave a faint smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I will." She slipped on her shoes, tucked the note into her pocket, and stepped out onto the porch. The heat settled around her, thick as syrup. Whatever news waited in town, she already knew it wouldn't be good. She walked the mile into town with the note clutched tight in her hand, dust rising around her shoes. The afternoon sun hung low, white and heavy against the rooftops, the air thick with the scent of pine and heat. When she reached Main Street, the wooden boardwalk groaned beneath her steps, each clatter of her shoes echoing louder than it should have. The bell over the sheriff's office door gave a sharp ring as she stepped inside. The sheriff looked up from his desk, hat resting beside a half-empty mug of coffee. He'd already spoken with his counterpart in Alexandria. "They never made it," he said quietly, setting the mug aside. "Your folks were found early this morning." Their automobile was pulled off along a dirt stretch just past Hollow Creek. One door hanging open, engine gone cold. He hesitated, thumb tracing the brim of his hat. "I'm sorry, Adelaide. They're gone." He said the deputies reckoned it might have been a panther. Adelaide, barely 18, believed them. Back then, she didn't know any better. She signed the guardianship papers with trembling hands, the pen heavy between her fingers. Each stroke carved the truth deeper. Her parents were gone, and Elliot was all she had left. Protecting him became everything. The walk home felt longer than it ever had before, each step heavier than the last. The papers in her bag pressed against her chest like proof of something she still refused to believe. By the time she reached the porch, the afternoon light had already begun to fade, and the house looked smaller, lonelier than she remembered. When she told him, he didn't cry at first. He squared his shoulders like he thought a grown man ought to, his jaw set tight, eyes fixed on the floorboards. For a while, Elena almost believed he might hold himself together. But later, when the lamps were low and the house had gone still, she heard him in the next room, soft, broken sounds muffled against his pillow. Baton Rouge felt different after the funerals. Maybe it was just her grief, but it seemed the whole town had gone quiet. Mills closing, families packing up, church doors locked midweek. Everyone was losing something. Adelaide kept telling Caroline she ought to go home and help her family. But Caroline had been her best friend since they were knee-high to a grasshopper. She wasn't about to leave Adelaide to face this difficult time alone or tend to Elliot by herself. She stayed through it all, fixing sandwiches no one touched, washing the dishes that didn't need washing, and brewing tea no one drank. After a few days, the shock began to dull. Neighbors stopped by with casseroles and soft words, and life, in its strange way, tried to go on. Elliot kept close to her side, and Adelaide found a rhythm in the quiet, sweeping the porch in the mornings, cooking simple suppers, and making sure Elliot had his lunch for school. Caroline saw that strength settling in, the kind that comes from sheer necessity, and at last she went home, promising to check in every few days. In the weeks that followed, the nights grew quieter, the air turning crisp enough to chase away the last traces of summer. By dusk, wood smoke drifted from the neighbors' chimneys. In that soft chill, Elena and Elliot settled into small routines that dulled the sharp edge of loss and made the house feel almost safe again. One evening, the kind that hinted at winter just around the bend, Elliot had fallen asleep on the couch, curled up with a book and too tired to climb the stairs. Adelaide gently covered him with a blanket, the soft blue one she kept folded at the foot of her bed. It smelled like lavender and old wood smoke and her. She remembered pausing at the top of the stairs, glancing back. His eyes were already shut. The blanket was pulled up to his chin. She thought he was safe. She never heard the door open. By the time she reached the parlor, the blanket was on the floor. The screen door banged softly in the wind, and Elliot lay on the floor, his body in a pool of blood. She dropped to her knees, cradled him, screamed his name, but there was nothing left to save. He was gone, Everyone was gone. Whatever had killed him was fast and ruthless. First, her parents, now her brother. It didn't feel random anymore. Something was picking them off one by one. The days that followed blurred together, neighbors whispering at the fence line, the sheriff offering empty assurances, the stain of blood that wouldn't wash from the floorboards no matter how hard she scrubbed. After the funeral, Caroline came by once or twice, but Elena wouldn't let her stay. She wanted the silence, wanted everyone gone so she could grieve without eyes on her. At night, she sat by the window with her father's rifle across her knees, watching the tree line and waiting for the thing that had taken everything from her to come back. Each night stretched longer than the one before, the silence pressing in until even the sound of the wind set her nerves on edge. Sleep felt dangerous, but wakefulness was worse. After a few days, exhaustion won. She told herself it was over, that she needed to try, at least in the small ways, to be human again. She needed a bath, a meal, a few hours of rest. So she moved through the motions like a ghost mimicking the living. When she finally crawled into bed, she pulled the covers tight beneath her chin. She wasn't standing watch tonight, but the rifle still leaned against her nightstand, and her father's hunting knife was tucked beneath her pillow, just in case. She hadn't expected to sleep, but sleep came fast, heavy, and unmerciful, pulling her under before she could fight it. And in her dreams, they were there, her family. They were sprawled out on the picnic blanket, sunlight glinting off the lake. Her father had just told one of his old jokes, and her mother rolled her eyes the way she always did. Adelaide and Elliot were still in their swim clothes, laughing so hard they could barely breathe. For a moment, everything was whole again. Laughter rippled through the air. Her father's voice carried low and warm, and her mother's smile caught the light just right. Then a shadow crossed the blanket. The sunlight dimmed, fading to gray. The laughter grew quiet. When Adelaide looked up, the sky had turned the color of smoke, and the water behind them was black and still. A chill crawled across her skin. She tried to call out to them, but her voice caught in her throat. Something moved at the edge of her vision, too close, too real to be part of the dream. She remembered little of the attack, only fragments. A shadow slipping at the edge of her bed, a whisper of breath too close to her ear, cold hands tightening around her throat, then teeth. Pain tore through her veins, spreading like fire, stealing her breath. The world tilted, darkening at the edges. Somewhere inside the panic, instinct took over. Her hand shot beneath the pillow, closing around the handle of her father's hunting knife. She swung wildly, catching him across the cheek. He hissed and recoiled, the sound wet and furious. The knife slipped from her grasp and clattered to the floor. Then his weight crashed down again. She felt her heartbeat slow. Inside, it felt as if her blood rose up in defiance, ancient and furious, striking back at what had invaded it. The vampire jerked away, choking. His scream split the dark as he fell, clutching at his chest. Adelaide tried to move, but her body convulsed, heat tearing through every vein. She gasped once, then collapsed back onto her bed. The last thing she saw was him crumpling to the floor before everything went black. When she woke, the house was still. The ceiling above her was familiar. The faint stain in the plaster, the crooked seam where the boards never quite met. For a moment, she thought she'd dreamed it all, but something was different. She blinked into the darkness. It should have been pitch black, yet she could see everything. The curve of the dresser, the threadbare quilt, the faint dust along the baseboards. She turned toward the window. Outside, a sliver of the moon shone high above the pines. Night still clung to the world, yet she saw it with perfect clarity. She sat up slowly, the movement sending a strange hum through her skin. The air felt alive. Downstairs, the clock ticked so loudly it hurt. She could hear the faint flutter of a moth's wings 3 rooms away. Every sound pressed against her, sharp and clear. The scent of the night poured through the open window, damp grass, wood smoke, and something sour rotten down by the creek. She could smell everything, and then another scent, stronger, copper, sweet and metallic, blood. It clung to her hair, her pillow, the sheets. Her fingers brushed her neck, smooth skin, no wound, no pain, only the dried blood and the memory that came rushing back, the vampire. She looked down. Drops of red trailed across the floorboards toward the open door. Her breath caught. Did she even need to breathe anymore? The house was empty, but the air still carried the faint, metallic echo of him. She quickly swung her legs over the edge of the bed, rising faster than usual. Her reflection in the dresser mirror stopped her short. Skin pale as porcelain, eyes darker, sharper. Instinctively, she placed her hand on her chest. The stillness sent a shiver up her spine. Panic clawed up her throat, but even that felt muted, distant, like her body couldn't quite remember how to feel. Then another sensation replaced it. Hunger, fierce, hollow, aching. It drove out every thought, every scrap of reason. The floorboards groaned as she ran for the stairs. Her vision pulsed in and out, everything too bright and too dark all at once. She didn't know where she was going until she was outside, barefoot in the damp grass. The woods swallowed her. Leaves crunched beneath her bare feet. She moved on instinct, drawn by something she didn't understand until she heard it. A rustle, a heartbeat, the snap of a twig. She pounced without thinking. It was small, furry. A raccoon, maybe. One moment it was alive, the next warmth was spilling across her tongue. Blood hot, metallic, and electric. She drank until it was dry. She didn't stop until the body went limp. When it was over, she stared at the thing in her hands and dropped it like it burned her. A low sound escaped her throat. She fell to her knees in the dirt, wiping at her face and hands on her nightgown. But the blood wouldn't come off. It was inside her now, in her teeth, her skin, her soul. She had become the thing she hated, the thing that had murdered her family. By the time Adelaide stumbled back through the trees, the sky was beginning to pale. Her hands and nightgown were streaked with dry blood. Her feet were caked with mud. Her breath came in shallow bursts, even though she didn't need to breathe anymore. The house stood quiet in the gray light, its windows like blind eyes watching her return. She slipped inside without looking at the couch. She couldn't bear to. The blue blanket lay where she'd left it, stained through. She stepped past it. Upstairs, she dropped to her knees on the floorboards, resting her forehead against the side of the dresser. She felt too hollow to cry. Her limbs trembled, but her eyes stayed dry. It was like her grief had nowhere to go, trapped inside a body that no longer worked the way it should. And then slowly, light began to creep across the floor. She froze. She'd heard the stories. What sunlight did to creatures like her, fire, ash, the wrath of God himself. Vampires didn't survive the dawn. Part of her wanted it to be true. She stood and faced the window. The golden light climbed higher, spilling across the bed, the walls, and then it touched her skin. Instinctively, she flinched, but after a few seconds, she realized nothing was happening. No pain, no smoke, no fire, but also no warmth. She felt nothing. It shimmered in the grooves of her palms, flickering faintly across the dried blood at her wrist. She turned her hand over, watching the sun settle into her palm. So much for bursting into flames, she thought. She stared at the sunlight as it washed over her, unsure what came next. All she knew was this: Elliot's killer was still out there, and she was a vampire who could walk in the sun.